Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of On Air. And today I am joined by Lauren Wright, who is the VP of Revenue at Demodesk. And today we're going to be talking about, do you know what, a topic that was probably talked about a lot in 2020 and 2021, perhaps has been left behind a bit in 2022 as we move towards some kind of long-term normality or whatever the new normal looks like. And that is the notion of remote working, hybrid working, in office, out of office. What's right for a sales team? What do we do within our sales org to get it right in 2022 and beyond? Lauren, first and foremost, thank you for joining us. And how are you?
I'm great. Yeah, it's great to be here. I know, speaking of remote work, we had some challenges between like our either like sickness, I don't know if it was COVID or not, but both of us had some challenges like trying to get this scheduled. So it's great to be here finally.
Yeah, lovely to have you on the show. And look, I'm keen to dive into topic, but we do have a format, which is on this show, we always give people 2 minutes up front to tell us who's Lauren, who are Demodesk, because there may be lots of people listening to this or watching this who know you, but there'll be some who don't. So could you do that for us?
I sure can. Yeah. So I'm Lauren. I am based in London, originally from the States, from San Francisco. I spent 9 years at Glassdoor previous to Demodesk, and a few years in, I moved over to start our European sales organization and thought it would be a 2-year stint, ended up a little bit longer. So here I am 7 years later, still in Europe, kind of settled here now, have a family and whatnot. So joined Demodesk, and Demodesk is basically solves a problem that I think we all can relate to, is that sales meetings often are horrible. They're meant to be structured and scalable, and often that is very hard to do. And so Demodesk helps sales reps stay on track, gives them some rails through playbooks and battle cards and all sorts of different things. So we can talk about that maybe later, but it's also kind of in the virtual world where we're selling sometimes remotely, sometimes in the office.
Love it. And it feeds into the topic. So I'm guessing Demodesk were one of the fortunate businesses who benefited from the world going virtual back in March 2020 to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, Demodesk was started, the idea of Demodesk was started before COVID. So it wasn't like, oh, okay, virtual selling, we got to figure this out. It was more of like, okay, this trend started way before COVID where you started seeing like enterprise sales start off in inside sales, and it's frankly more efficient, at least a certain part of your sales cycle to run inside meetings. And the question is like, when do you go out into the field, or do you need to go out into the field? And then COVID sort of forced us all into this world, and now you're seeing deal sizes get done much higher than a completely virtual space. So that of course comes with its challenges, right? It's not easy to both run and know what's going on as a sales leader in all of your meetings. It's great to have sort of a sales floor where you can you can kind of like grab things through osmosis and kind of hear like the flavor of what's going on in the meetings. But for the most part, like when you have a distributed team, it's very hard to understand like what is happening during a sales meeting, where the friction points are, how to coach and help your team. There are lots of tools out there now that have emerged. Conversation intelligence is a big area, kind of looking at what happens after the meeting and analyzing it. And then where we sit is more kind of in the meeting and executing the playbook itself.
Got you. That makes sense. So cards on table. Where are you from a team perspective? Where, what's your in-office versus at-home remote split at the moment?
Yeah, so on the revenue team, which is SDRs, AEs, CS, we are 17 people. We have mostly centered around hubs. So we started off, I'll be like honest, I started off with this sort of like, oh, okay, we'll hire anyone, like the best people anywhere, and using a remote work platform, to hire. like an employer of record. We partner with Oyster, and they've been great. But in theory, like, it didn't really work that well to hire anybody anywhere. So we really are centered at this point around hubs. So we have London, Munich, and Lisbon as our 3 hubs. And particularly as you start to think about people who need more support in our early careers, yeah, in COVID, it was easy because they were all working from home anyway. But as we start to think about issues like mental health, like, people who are just accustomed to, having, let's be honest, like, work for many of us, especially in our early careers, was part of our social life, was like, where we made a lot of our, our colleagues, yes, but our colleagues became friends, and that sort of disappeared during COVID, but it can't just take place over, a Zoom or whatever, functional meeting tool you're using. It's actually exhausting on our brains to constantly be trying to socialize over a screen.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? I mean, I think the interesting thing about the pandemic is it took choice away. It took choice away from most of us where we had to work from home. And I think there's a different approach or mentality to something when you're forced to do it. We're now, certainly in the UK, it feels we're past that. It now is about choice, identity, the culture of the organization, and the person as an individual, what they want within their lives. And we're starting to see people settle into well, this is what I want. This is what the future looks like for the business or the individual. And it's interesting to see companies now having to move from that temporary state to actually, here's the future, here's the permanent decision. Interesting to hear you talk about the mental health piece, and I'm no mental health expert, and as far as I'm aware, neither are you, but
Definitely not.
we've all been overexposed to it in terms of compared to the 2 years prior in the last couple of years. And it's great to hear it's well up on the agenda of a lot of particularly sales leaders, but generally business leaders at the moment. And it's having a massive influence on how we decide what the right makeup of virtual and remote and in office looks like, and feels like that's very much played a role in the way that you're seeing things.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it's kind of helped us rethink, like, what how to motivate employees, first of all, and also to look at employees. Like, I think work-life balance was like sort of on trend at some point in time. People were talking about it a lot. I mean, I worked at Glassdoor for a long time, so we were really very into sort of the cultural aspects of work.
Mm.
And work-life balance seems like a very black and white thing. There's work and then there's life. But the reality is there's like all these other things that go on that are like part of life and part of work, and finances and this and that. And like, balancing that is difficult, and it also depends on where you are in your in your life journey, in your career journey. So, like, looking at employees as individuals, what their situation is. I, for example, have a family. I don't necessarily, I have, I love my colleagues, but I don't necessarily need to get my energy from the office all the time. So I'm based in London, but I'm based from home, and go to the different offices and love my time there. But I also, love spending time with my family, and feel, so grateful that COVID allowed this, new era where you can, see your children wake up and potentially put them to bed at night too. Where that, like, I mean, I worked in London, but I like actually didn't see my daughter wake up or put her to bed sometimes because I was either traveling to the office so early or coming back so late. So we were kind of just like sleeping in the same house. So I think it's important though for like people who are early careers to be able to go into the office and create those connections. It becomes such a part of your energy, your social life. You can't just sit in a room and let's be honest, like, when you're like, unless you have the means from other, usually your salary does not give you the means to have some like amazing crib for you to work from. So usually, I know my early career was in New York City, and I've basically lived in a box. So I was like, like barely a window. I mean, I heated my apartment sometimes like from the oven. So like I spent a lot of time outside of that box. And New York City was a great place to be because, you had like a million friends in like 3-block radius.
Yeah.
So,
Amazing, isn't it? Just even hearing you talk there, it aligns with something that I've seen within our business and a number of our clients' businesses, which is that those that, let's say, under the age of 30, I'm grouping to some degree. It might not be exactly that number. Early stage careers, I think they're missing an opportunity or missing a trick by not being around their colleagues, not being in the office some of the time. I'm going to say
yeah.
some. I'm a big fan of being in the office, and I've chosen to be in the office all the way through. But I also have the luxury of living 7-minute walk from my office, right? So it's a very different world. So I get to be in the office and still put my kids to bed and wake up with them and all that kind of stuff, which is
You're living the dream.
yeah, absolutely. But I think my point here is that I think to some degree it seemed like there's a trend around seniority, experience, maturity in business and wanting to be in the office. It's almost as though those that are more junior have been less likely to come into the office, but ironically are the people that probably need it the most. Have you seen something similar to that, or has it been different within your business?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so much to learn, right? And so many different connections, like both cross-functionally, you might have exposure to the meetings that you're in virtually, just because there is an operating rhythm, and then you're in the meetings that are, relevant to your department, but you never really have that cross-functional exposure unless you're in the office. You never really, I mean, I was just in our Munich office and played ping pong with our and darts with our engineers, and it just is a different. You start to learn about people and people in your organization, and also see things through their paradigm, right? So we're in sales, but we if we're missing a trick if we're not working with product a lot, and understanding things through the way that they work, and having lunch casual conversations, like not work conversations, is really meaningful and important. So you have to either, if you have, I'm not saying that the office is the only way to do that, but you need to create conditions for that to happen, whether it's offsites or what have you.
It's interesting. So I've been having this debate a lot with people around the responsibility. Let's take an SDR team, for example, and how we as individuals have the responsibility to perform at the highest level we possibly can. That's part of our responsibility to our employer, but also to ourselves and our career, that we want to be the best that we can be, and finding the balance as to where we can do that best. And in my view, it's not in the office 5 days a week, but it's also not at home 5 days a week. It's somewhere in the middle. No doubt that will vary organization to organization, team to team, person to person. The thing that I think has been missed in a lot of this is that as senior leaders, as coaches, as managers, whatever you want to call it, I think we also have a responsibility to be present so that people can learn from us.
Yes.
Because actually, it's not just about us, people coming in because you can learn. Geez, they've got to have people to learn from around as well. Otherwise, the whole system is broken. And I think it's been really interesting to see that actually those people that absolutely can do their jobs from home because they're mature enough to do that, have they recognized and acknowledged that actually they have a responsibility to help those around them learn from them. Very hard to do that remotely.
Yeah. And part of like underlying that is also trust. So like I, can try to coach someone from, far away and through a screen, and that works. I can listen to calls and then write notes on, my conversation intelligence tool. But really, like when things resonate, it's actually because there's a trust alliance, and when I'm able to ask questions when I don't understand or I need to clarify something with my manager, I might be hesitant to do that if I haven't established trust and don't have. It's just easier when I'm walking to lunch and like, hey, I have a question for you. It's just a safer environment for some reason, because we're humans and that's nature. I don't, but that trust element, I think, whether or not you have an office, like you need to have some system to create. I mean, it doesn't sound right to say a system to create trust, but you need to, figure out the right environment so that you can, really create an alliance with somebody so that they feel safe to ask you the hard questions.
I'm interested to hear whether you've changed what you do when you are together, because a lot of people have talked about, creating an event when you're together, making it less about stuff that you could do at home normally and making it about the things that you can only do when you're together, whether that be social or whether that be, a training development opportunity, learning from each other, whatever it might be. Have you approached being in person differently, knowing that it happens less often?
Yeah, I mean, we do quarterly offsites,
Mm,
and in my previous employer, we had offices. So when we also did quarterly offsites, but it
yeah.
was more of like, okay, this is training, this is an opportunity for our product marketing team to get in front and roll something out, versus today, where I have a team that's dispersed a little bit and we're not always together. It's more of an opportunity for us to collaborate and workshop. And so we do more like workshops and building things together than we do kind of a mini sales kickoff, if you will, before the quarter.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what advice would you give to somebody? So, in talking to people at the moment, I get sense there's a group of people who have been fairly set on we need to have physical contact in one way, shape, or form, varying levels, and others who have stayed remote and who are now trying to find a way to get people back together, and in some ways are having difficulties doing that. What advice would you have to people who are trying to get their team back together, trying to encourage people to spend time together physically, where they've maybe got some pushback or some hesitancy from people within the team?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on sort of how you've brought them into the organization. So if you've
Mm,
promised them that they can work on some remote island off the coast of Scotland, like
yeah.
that's what you've promised that person. And so I think you need to have a real conversation with them of like, here's the gaps I see, and also like what's in it for them. Of like, okay, it's yes about like getting together with the team, but it's also about your career and what if you've had the conversation about their career and the trajectory of their career, this may be preventing them from actually building the relationships that they need to
Mm,
progress. And it's not that you can't live in the place that you're living to progress. It's just that you need to, come together on a regular cadence. And I think setting, in an ideal world, you've set that operating rhythm up early so that people know that they're expected to travel a certain
yeah.
amount.
Can I go back to something you said at the beginning? And I'm paraphrasing your point. You said when you first started building the team or something along those lines, it was hire the best person wherever they were, but that didn't work. It feels like lots of companies in the pandemic reacted to the state situation and took that approach. Well, let's use it as an opportunity to hire the best people anyway, go
Yeah.
fully remote. And then you've seen companies like Google do that and then come back and have, oh, geez, we got it wrong. Let's get everybody in 3 days a week. And, they've got several of their offices back 3 days a week, complete about turn.
Yeah.
Do you feel like people sort of reacted too quickly there? And I'm keen to just pick your brain on, if so, what was it about you doing that when you look back on it in hindsight now, why didn't it work?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was very aspirational. It was like, okay, we're all stuck in our homes, like we can do
Yeah.
this. But the longevity of it, of everyone being stuck in their homes in all these different places, sort of at some point it lost its luster, at least for
Mm,
me. And then I think, it's the difficulty of hiring, like it's an HR nightmare. It is an HR nightmare. Like imagine, employees like have life events and then you have to figure out how to support them in those life events. You
mm,
have to figure out like employment laws and all these different pieces. Like, I mean, one of the first challenges I had coming from the States to the UK was like, oh, wait, what is this probation period? In the US, if you say probation, it has to do with jail. Like I did not, I remember like telling people internally, they're like, can we change the name of the, like that to, can we remove the word probation? I was like, no, it's like a standard thing in Europe. Like we're not going to change that. It's an employment law. But, there are all these nuances to different countries. And even in the US, there are nuances to different states. So in state laws that you have to abide to. So it's complicated.
yeah.
And if you want to create a place where you can also support your employees and they'll thrive and give them benefits that are meaningful, then you should probably, choose wisely on like the places where, you'd like to employ employees and then really invest in those regions. So that's like, part of the pivot was just like realizing how aspirational it was to be able to hire and have anyone. And then, how can we still accomplish this kind of like feeling of working from everywhere? Well, we have sort of a work from anywhere policy, so you can go and extend your vacation and work from there, or, you know, giving people sort of flexibility, which, you know, solved that kind of feeling of it. People post pictures of like when they're, you know, working from some cool place and some cool, and I'm sure this happens, you know, on everyone's Slack, and that's cool. But in order to really support those people the right way, we found it didn't work.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because in allowing yourselves the option of employing anybody anywhere, and in theory getting the best person for the job, and I'm going to ask you a question about that in a minute. You create another issue, which is that it's harder to get people together, therefore potentially harder to build connections, therefore poses logistical challenges around, well, actually, if we do want to have an on-site, an off-site, so if we do want to get people in one place, if we do need to collaborate at a physical level, suddenly it's not an option for us.
Yeah.
And you open one door, yet you close another behind you potentially.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Very interesting. So did you get better people?
I mean, in theory, yes, but like we also made some hiring mistakes. And I think figuring out like the right hire for your organization and like figuring out the right a remote hire is very difficult, particularly because everybody was remote, right? So it wasn't like, you know, you have some people who are used to working remote and know how to kind of insert themselves into an organization, even though they're isolated. And we had situations where, you know, people just were not maybe even in the same country, but were remote, but still like really wanted to benefit from that connection and realized after the fact that, wait, this isn't for them. And so when things started to, you know, come back, they realized like maybe I should be working for a company that's local versus, you know, trying to figure things out on my own. And it's just not the right thing for me. Or, you know, maybe my family setup is like, oh, I wanted to spend time with my family. Like for me, it works. Some people are like, I can't wait to get out of my house and my kids and everything else. So I get that too. You know, so it depends on your situation.
I'm keen to understand what tools you've been using. Demodesk is an obvious one, so please do mention it because I know you'll have been using it. But you know, I know there'll be others as well. What are the things that you've relied on? What are the things that have helped you to keep the transparency there around team performance moving to a remote world? Because I'm guessing before you could, like you say, you be on the sales floor, listen, you start learning by osmosis or listening by osmosis. Now it's gone. We're relying on tools. What are the things that you're saying to people? These are the things that you need to go and get.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I think a like a just workplace productivity collaboration tool like Slack is great. I mean, there is a problem of like inundation of Slack channels, which I think you need to actually have like a Slack policy because it does get out of control and also can like lead to mental health issues. I think if you don't keep it under control, because it's just like the feeling of like needing to instantly respond to people is you know, difficult. So we actually outlined a Slack policy so that, you know, people knew the rules of engagement when and what to expectations when you're going over Slack, that you don't have to respond yesterday.
Can you give an example of what you did there?
Yeah, it's just like setting up, you know, the right emoticons when you're away from your desk, if you're having a coffee, etc. Just to like set up Slack notifications, you know, to have reasonable expectations when you Slack people, and to turn your notifications off when you're on holiday, like very simple things. And then, you know, when to create and who can create a Slack channel and who cannot. And then when to make it private, like best practices on, you know, if it's a team channel, like what to pin at the top, you know, little things like that, that somehow like Slack just skyrocketed. And I don't think I certainly didn't have like a formal training on Slack. It was intuitive. It's cool. You know how to use it, but there's a lot it can do. And it's worth spending like 15 minutes just figuring out like how to remind yourself about Slack notifications and just use it just like you would, you know, with your Gmail account or your email in general. I mean, other tools, well, I will say Demodesk, obviously. I mean, actually, one of the things that we realized sort of halfway through the pandemic was, wait a minute, like the sales floor is actually missing. Like the sales floor, the energy of the sales floor. We already had a shadowing tool. So you could go, like, we're having a meeting right now. My manager could be on this meeting and just shadowing us in, in the background, and maybe sending me like a note or two on, how to do some, but like you could have a live shadow, or like onboarding folks, into the organization, instead of having that like awkward third person in the meeting that you have, like you can just shadow live meetings. But we took it a step further and just created a virtual sales floor. So when I log into Demodesk, I can see everyone else who's having meetings. So like my brothers and sisters of sales, like out there doing the thing. So there's like some euphoria, like that you get from, I don't know, stepping on a sales floor. Like I still, like if you've been in sales a long time, you just like step on a sales floor and you're like, yeah, this is what I like to hear. Like the buzzing, people are negotiating, they're standing up, they're sitting down. Like that feeling is, I think, not something that you can recreate virtually, but you can try, for those who will be remote and will be virtual, you can really try to recreate that through a virtual sales floor to give that feeling of like, I'm not alone. Everyone else is running this at the same time, and you can see exactly where they are in their meeting and then go into your meeting with some energy.
Love that. I love that. And you're right. I've said for a long time, the challenge has been with going remote that the highs have got lower because there's no one to celebrate with, there's no physical presence, and the lows have got lower because there's no one to bounce you back up. And that's what's been really hard for people. We've had to create other ways to lift each other when it's hard, when you're not getting anywhere, particularly if you're doing, SDR job where you're out pitching, you're doing demos and people are rejecting it, or, asking difficult questions, or you're in negotiation. It can be really tough. Yet there isn't that person to just bounce off of immediately. And I can see that, Slack can be brilliant for that kind of stuff. And again, one door opens, another one closes. It creates a new challenge for you to think about. We went as far as saying, actually, if you're going to use Slack, make it with something you don't need a response to. So if you need a response, email, phone, whatever, but Slack is something that is an FYI rather than I need a response. That was a real game changer for us. And I think, those little things of learning how to use something, really powerful. I love the sound of that with Demodesk, though, recreating the sales floor. It's the closest thing I've heard to being able to do that. And I'm guessing, you practice what you preach, right? You eat your own dog food, all that kind of stuff. You're out there doing it, and it sounds like it's had a real benefit on the team.
Yeah, I mean, it's great for members of the team. It's also great for me as a leader to be able to see, okay, like what is happening right now, and like, are they following the playbook, and all of the things that I need to know without being a militant sales leader kind of hanging over people's head. And then I'm able to kind of use analytics and see what's working and what's not. So it serves a dual purpose. But the energy side of it, I think, is like an important thing for salespeople for the reasons that you mentioned.
So hang your hat on something for me, and to the audience, I would appreciate this will all be personal preference and personal experience. What's the right blend for you? So, I'm guessing it's not never see each other, and I'm guessing it's not in the office every day. What do you think is the right blend for a sales org now with SDRs, A's, and CS within it? Where do you see Wright fitting?
Yeah, I mean, I hesitate to use the word right because I don't think there's like one blueprint for a sales organization, but I think what works well for us is having a hybrid culture. And when we're talking about early careers SDRs, those who would benefit from a lot of learning collaboration, we really are moving more into office. So being in the office, learning from one another. Obviously, it's situational, like I mentioned in the beginning. So we have some SDRs who are, moms, and some like single mothers. And so like it doesn't always work that way. And so it is situational. But I think, figuring out what works best for people, and then also solving for the team, and building around these hubs has worked well for us. And then as we get into senior folks, we are a little bit more open to, hey, work from, these approved regions. And that has worked well for us, but we also have dedicated time to come together as a team. And I personally get a lot of energy. Like I was in Munich last week. I left with just a lot of energy from being not only with my direct team, but with my broader team. And I think that is really important. And just the creativity that comes, like we are humans, we're meant to be, with other humans. And I think, like I alluded to this earlier, I think there's an element where your brain is working really, really hard to figure out like body language and signals and all of the things. And like, I know people are trying to produce like AI that figures this out for you, but at the end of the day, like a human conversation is just, it is relaxing, and it takes all the other things that are going on in your brain out so that you can focus on the conversation.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think even now, I struggle between when I'm talking, looking at the camera and looking at your face on the screen. It's silly little things like that you just don't have to think about in person.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting to hear that approach to more experienced people being given a little bit more freedom. I love the way you've moved to approved regions. I like that phrase. So yes, you can be remote, but you've got to be able to commit to something, and that just gives you as a team choice, doesn't it? And it gives you the ability to pull together if it's the right thing to do for the business. And it sounds like that's you taking a bit more control back, but understanding that people still need that balance. So fascinating to hear the journey you've been on and hear how you're approaching it. Final thing for me, just any other points, any other advice you give to people around running a hybrid team? It's not easy. We're all learning at the same time. So any advice you give to people who are running a hybrid team, things that have worked for you or things that maybe you've done that definitely didn't work that people can learn from?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two kind of big things is like make sure that your setup is the right one. So like for us, we have yes, the technology setup. So we're lucky in that we can eat our own dog food or use our sales platform to help kind of drive the playbook and have the sales rep work from anywhere. But also, the hardware has to work too. So make sure if you have people working remotely that you're actually investing in, the right setup for them, and that you've actually like checked where they are going to be working. Do they have a home office? Like it seems like a sort of silly thing to ask, but you should ask it because if they're working from their kitchen every day, it's just not going to work. And then also like that means like nuancing your hiring playbook. So the questions that you ask, you really need to make sure like, is this individual wanting to work remotely because they think it's going to work, or do they actually, are they the right person for you to hire and can do it? Have they done it before? Like, how are they going to approach it? There are questions that I think you need to dig into in the interview process to really ensure that that's the right fit. Because that's where I personally ran into challenges before, is just not figuring out, okay, because we're all working remotely, like surely it will work, but it's really not that easy. And I think you need to really stress test that.
Yeah, interesting, fantastic advice. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us. Really interesting discussion and great to hear that you guys have gone in one direction, changed a little bit, tweaked it and kept trying things. And no doubt if we talk again in 6-12 months, there'll be more learnings. Certainly great to hear the way that you've approached it. Before we wrap up, two questions. One, who should be talking to Demodesk? And who can you help? And two, how do they get in touch with Demodesk or with yourself if they want to talk to you?
Yeah, good question. So usually the best company is for Demodesk is and for them is on a journey scaling up. Usually, somewhere post 5 million, I say 10 million in revenue because that's sort of the benchmark. But really, like as you've figured out a repeatable process and you have some playbooks, then that's where Demodesk can really help get that rinsed and repeated for teams as you hire, both in different regions and across the world. That's where Demodesk really comes in and helps you execute on playbooks and make your conversations effective everywhere.
Brilliant. And what's the best way they should get in touch? Demodesk website, right to you?
I mean, you can definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can also go to the Demodesk website. We have lots of information there, and also book a demo button if it sounds super interesting for you. So those are the best ways.
Lovely. Lauren, thank you ever so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Pleasure.